adjust my crown. So this video is just all about functional neurological disorder, and I'm making it because I have functional neurological disorder, and I get a lot of questions about it, and I'm just starting to open up about it to people, and what all it entails and the ways that it prevents me from doing a lot of things. One of those things is talking about it and explaining all of this over and over and over, because it is exhausting and depressing. So I'm making a video. So you might have guessed that functional neurological disorder has to do with the nervous system and the brain. So it is called functional because it affects the function of your body instead of the structure, like in the brain and things like that. Also because of that, they can't find a physical structural thing going on with it. So if you think about it, that makes sense. When you're getting an MRI or looking at something like MS, you see structural damage, right? You can visibly see that, and that would be in the wiring, the hardware. And so that's something that they, can diagnose right away and can start treating. With the functional neurological disorder, it's more of a software problem rather than a hardware problem. So it's not something that you can just see. It's more in the programming and the signals that are being sent from your brain to your body and your body to your brain and things like that. A little bit of history about functional neurological disorder is that it was called conversion disorder, and is still called that by a lot of doctors. It's just now recently transitioning into functional neurological disorder and recognized as an actual brain problem, brain issue, like brain damage in the limbic system, or like I said, like your nerve signals, instead of psychological. So before this change, it was considered to be a psychological disorder, and it was called conversion disorder because the doctors, because they couldn't see anything in the MRIs and the EEGs and things, they were like, well, it's psychological, so your body is converting these psychological symptoms into physical symptoms, like somatizing them, right? And that's what was previously thought. And before, it was conversion disorder, which even on the timeline of that wasn't that long ago, 80s maybe. It was hysteria in women, and before that, post World War I, with shell shock in men. So it's been this really stereotyped, difficult sort of disorder that's been around and written about. Ancient Greece, there's, writings on this disorder happening in people and happening suddenly. And so it's been around as long as people have been around, but the stigma behind it, because allopathic doctors couldn't see something wrong with you, like a broken leg, they have just dismissed it into something completely psychological. And just now, the science of understanding neuroplasticity and how traumas, whether they're physical or emotional or any sort of trauma, it changes the brain and how it reacts to things. And in this case, the brain wiring looks okay, but the programming has a glitch. So it isn't the psychological disorder. You're not just having anxiety and then having physical symptoms due to that, which is also very real. But this is a disorder where your brain is sending faulty signals. Another example of a disorder termed functional, because they can't see what causes it, is IBS. But those are real symptoms, that they're very real things that people struggle with. And FND is very much the same way. It's very real. There's very real symptoms. And the severity, how long episodes last, if it's like waves, or you have them sometimes, you don't have them sometimes, or you have them all the time, and exactly what the symptoms are vary greatly from person to person that has been diagnosed with this, which is also why it is kind of an umbrella term for these neurological symptoms that they don't really have an answer for. And then later on, doctors will either re-diagnose if they find something, or you get all these little cute little sub-diagnoses underneath it, like I have. You could scroll the list of all these disorders that came with my functional neurological disorder onset, and those have their own treatments and everything, but they are symptoms of this something that's bigger, something that isn't quite understood yet. Some basic symptoms or things that are affected by FND are motor function, sensory function, and awareness. So with that, you can have a movement disorder, a functional movement disorder associated with functional neurological disorder, which is something that is very common. And I also have sensory dysfunction. So for example, blurry vision. In my right eye, tunnel vision. I get all the time dizziness, vertigo, dissociation is a big one. I guess that would be the awareness, right? Episodes of altered awareness. So dissociation. People can have epileptic seizures, or I have non-epileptic seizures and convulsion episodes. Other things symptoms that can be associated with it that are common, some which I have, like chronic fatigue syndrome, anxiety, depression, heightened awareness, heightened senses, oh my gosh, tremor, spasms, pain, temporary paralysis, speech problems, memory problems. I don't remember if I already said that, but memory problems, trouble just staying in the moment. I have intentional tremor. That's what I was trying to remember. So like when I reach for something, or when I'm, I don't just have my hands in my lap, then there's tremor. Other sensory dysfunctions include numbness. Like a lot of people have it in one side of the body worse than the other. Mine's my right side. I get numbness, like facial all the way down my leg, spasms, burning sensations, pins and needles. Gosh, it like feels like on fire all the time. Just things that your brain is sending to your body, that it's distress signals, but there's not a distress. Your brain is stuck in this loop, like there's a virus in a computer, and it affects all of the programs, all of them. So I know that I do a lot, or I talk a lot about like mental health issues and things, and I do talk about anxiety and depression and PTSD and CPTSD, and I want to make a clarification between the difference of the physical symptoms you get from the psychological mental health disorders like anxiety and PTSD and things like that. When you have the panic attack, you have the heart palpitations, you have all of these very, very real physical symptoms, but then they usually settle down on their own after whatever the trigger. And with functional neurological disorder, a lot of times this has been happening to you, over periods of time, and you've experienced the somatization of these psychological factors. But when the functional neurological disorder develops, your brain gets stuck and you don't eventually go back to functioning, right? It affects your function. So, heart palpitations right now. So, like I said before, there's a lot of different reasons or causes, they think, for functional neurological disorder. It's not just prolonged stress or mental health issues, psychological issues, prolonged anxiety, things like that. It usually comes on after a big traumatic experience. It could be a physical trauma, like a head injury, or emotional trauma, or something like that. Something where, you know, your brain just gets into this, it's stuck. You know, something big enough for it to get stuck. But that can also be things like infectious diseases, and other triggering factors. It's not just brought on by psychological issues, and it isn't a psychological problem. You know, it is a software problem. It is a brain nervous system problem, and it isn't something that you can control, and it isn't something that they know how to treat really right now. You know, there's things that can treat symptoms like the burning, the movement disorder part of it. For me, I am being treated for some of the movement, but a lot of that goes away once the medication wears off, and I have these spasms, these periods of paralysis, nausea, tremor, twitching, weakness, and mostly what it is just learning what you can and can't do and what causes flares. For me, there's always this, it's always in the background, you know, like static noise. Like there's always burning, there's always numbness, there's always vision loss and weakness and exhaustion and things like that. But it's been almost 3 years now since the onset of my disorder, and it's taken me a really long time to listen to my body and know what's going to cause a flare or a non-epileptic seizure or a convulsion episode, and I've also learned what happens in my body when one's about to start, so I can kind of gauge it in that way. And it's taken me a long time to talk about it too, and to accept the diagnosis of functional neurological disorder. I was diagnosed with it about in January of 2020. My symptoms came on in June of 2018, and I was told after being really ill and taking some medication for it and things that neurological symptoms were normal, but they would go away. They didn't go away. They got worse, and they kept progressing and getting worse and worse to the point where I couldn't work anymore. I couldn't physically do normal activities, and I wasn't safe on my own. So that was about 9 months after the onset. And I had been seeing doctors previously. I've been to so many doctors and had so many tests done. And finally, after, a year and a half or so of being a lab rat, and I feel like they could make 100 of me, an army of me, out of how much blood they have of mine from all the blood work. But after that, my neurologist at the time, he kind of just was like, I don't know, shook my hand and told me to see a psychiatrist. And that is pretty common. When they don't know, there's this ego, issue where I've had a lot of doctors that really, really want to help, but I've also had a lot of doctors that, if they don't know, they just dismiss you as faking it, or send you off. You're not their problem anymore. And that's kind of how I felt this doctor was. He just didn't want to deal with me anymore, and he was like, see a psychiatrist. Well, I do go to therapy. I see a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I saw a therapist. I've been doing CBT, and I did CPT, and I've been doing some EMDR, but I'm not in a space right now to continue that treatment mentally. So anyway, I am seeing super specialists and things like that. But along the way, just that feeling of dismissal and everything added to the depression that came with everything being taken away, all of my abilities, my physical abilities. I couldn't do anything anymore, so that took a huge toll on my mental health, and then on top of it being dismissed. And so really it's taken me up until now to come out with it. Like, this is how I am. I am disabled. I need help physically doing things. I have very specific limitations. And I have right now what's called functional neurological disorder. And that's hard to admit. It's hard to admit it. It's hard to say it out loud, and it's hard to tell people about. And it's especially hard to tell people that you've known for years, that have seen you, active and fine. And it's hard to show yourself as needing help walking. And, you know, it's very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable place to be in. And like I said, I was looking, going to more doctors, and I'm still going to more doctors constantly, and trying different treatments. And, you know, I had a naturopath, and I was treating myself, and all of these things. I've tried so many things because I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want this to be my life, you know. So I haven't spoken out about it because I feel like once I say it, it's reality. But it's been reality, and I've just been in denial, and I'm becoming really grateful for the opportunities it's given me to learn about myself, how I handle situations, and it's taught me how to slow down, how to appreciate small things. And it took a lot of dark times and hopelessness to get there, but I'm there, and I'm ready. I'm ready to be open about it. I'm ready to share my experience and hopefully my healing and growth with everybody.